I'm Mindy Peterson, and this is Enhanced Life with Music, where we explore the ways music can make our lives better and spotlight the resources you can use to enhance your life with music. I have a special place in my heart for anyone who has ever dealt with insomnia. I suffered from severe insomnia for several years. Fortunately, I was able to find a doctor who was able to resolve this for me, but I'm realizing more and more how common sleep disturbances are. And unfortunately, the older I get, the more I'm realizing how common they are for people as we age. In episode 188, our topic was some recent research on soothing sleep with music for older adults, especially those with dementia. And I heard from a lot of listeners. This is definitely a topic of interest for a lot of people of all ages and not just older adults with dementia. So I'm excited about today's conversation. We're exploring an app that provides scientifically created functional music that helps in a lot of areas of life, including sleep. On its website, it sounds like the average time it can put you to sleep with this music is 10 to 15 minutes. It can help you sleep more deeply. As if that's not enough, this app also offers music to help you focus and be more productive, relax on demand, and has other applications as well to help you optimize your life. We're talking today about Brain FM. I love Brain FM's tagline, music powered by science. Get more done with less effort and unlock your best self on demand. I'm in. Joining me today from Hawaii is Brain FM's Director of Science, Dr. Kevin Woods. Kevin has degrees from New York University and Harvard. He is passionate about harnessing the power of sound as an accessible tool to help people around the world. Welcome to Enhanced Life with Music, Kevin.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is wonderful.
I think, as you know, Kevin, I learned about Brain FM through Eric Fisher and the Beyond the To-Do List podcast. I know Eric is a big fan of Brain FM. I'm a fan of his, so I've been wanting to feature Brain FM for a while and finally got around to it. In researching Brain FM, I discovered that another guest on my podcast, Eric's been a guest, but also another guest of mine, Dr. Psyche Louie, is Brain FM's academic collaborator. Shout out to her and Eric Fisher. I'll put links in the episode notes to my interviews with those two. But when I saw that Dr. Louie was connected with Brain FM, I reached out to her. She introduced us, and I was so excited to learn more about Brain FM. So starting out, how do you describe Brain FM to people who aren't familiar with it?
Sure. So at the most basic level, I start by explaining why Brain FM exists, which is to say, hey, these days there's a disconnect between why people listen to music and why people create music. And if you go on Spotify, you can find music to cook to, music to run to, music to whatever, and of course, music to sleep to, right? But this music wasn't made for that purpose, right? In general, music in those playlists was curated, right? It was
Sure.
Yeah, it was created by an artist to express their feelings or, be beautiful or whatever else artists do. And it was co-opted, if you like. And often it does indeed have properties that are useful for the thing you're trying to do. But the basic question that Brain FM asks is, if we make music from the ground up to do this, can we do a better job than just curating, right? And so that's where we start. And we say, okay, let's take a step back, look at what you're trying to accomplish, look at how the brain, the brain states that you have to be in to be sleeping or to be running or to be focusing, and figure out how to use music to drive your brain into those states. And we very quickly find that, sure, curating music that just so happens to have such and such properties may be okay, but you can actually do a lot better if you start from that perspective, right? With the listener's goals in mind. So that's where I start. Another level of
I love, let me just interrupt real quick, because I love how you started that off with like this disconnect between why music was created and why it's being listened to. I mean, I haven't heard it described that way, but that's pretty profound.
And this is a new thing, right? 30 years ago, this was not an issue at all, right? Maybe even 20 years ago. This is purely a result of, the digital age, having music available at all times and personal listening, right? In fact, everybody iPods are no longer a thing, but everybody has a way to listen to whatever music they want at any time. And so, of course, you get, this effect of what's called functional music, right, coming to the fore, which is, I try to make this distinction between functional music with a capital F and art music with a capital A. But the fact is,
Mhm.
99% of music in the world is art music, right? And very little of it is made to be functional. But if you go way back, in human history, functional music is some of the first music that existed. If you think about what a lullaby is, right?
Uh-huh.
Sure, a lullaby is beautiful, it sounds nice, but really, ultimately, it has a function of putting a baby to sleep, and if it doesn't do
Yeah.
that, it's not doing its job, right? And so that's an example of functional music. You can think about, music for, working if you're trying to do coordinated work with people, like rowing oars on a ship, for example. You might need, drums to coordinate bodily movements, and things of that nature. Shamanism and medicine in many different traditions has functional music for healing the body. So these are very ancient forms of music, but in the last several hundred years, there's been this thing of no, 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 music is for expressing feelings and purely for being beautiful. And now, with the technology, we're coming back around to this ancient way of relating to music, which is what does it do for us, right?
Wow, that's really fascinating to think about too. Yeah, that we're returning back to the sort of music's ancient roots. Because when you think about music from ancient times, it was used militarily, for
Hmm.
coordinating marching or, that type of thing, or on boats, rowing together. And
Hmm.
gosh, I'm not good on video games, but I remember a piano student's mom early on in when this podcast was very young talking about one of the video games uses these sea shanties.
Hmm.
And that's a
Hmm.
reflection on ancient use of music with people like all of these rowers rowing together to move these boats. So, yeah. And then we've moved up Maslow's hierarchy of needs down through generations to now we're able to have the luxury of using music to just express ourselves. But there still is this very applicable use of music functionally for different purposes.
Absolutely. And so the result of making, art music with a capital A is that you end up with music that is made to grab your attention, right? And if you're a good music producer, you use words like punchy or bright or shiny because you want to make people sit up and turn their head and request the song on the radio or what have you.
Got that
But
hook.
yeah, but really, when you're making functional music, really for any purpose, it's kind of like a background, right? And yeah, you don't need it to have the hooks and the drops and the breaks, right? You just need it to do its thing. And
Uh-huh.
so all these sort of rules of music production that exist now of, oh, I have to use my compressor and my reverb to make the thing really pop. Well, that stuff doesn't really apply when it comes to functional music. And so the musicians at Brain FM had to really figure out this new way of making music where they're flipping a lot of these production rules on their head. They're saying, hey, actually, this is mostly music that's made to be ignored, as weird as that sounds, right? And especially when it comes to something like sleep. The last thing you want to do is have music that's going to grab your attention, right? But that's also
Sure.
true for focus and for meditation, for really everything we do. And so, yeah, they had to relearn how to make music.
So tell us a little bit more about the science behind sort of creating this music from the ground up
Yep.
for a specific purpose.
Absolutely. So, the simplest way of saying it is that we make music that is designed to change the patterns in your brain. And in fact, it does. And we've shown that it does, right?
Okay.
It changes the patterns in your brain. And by patterns in your brain, we mean neural oscillations or brain waves, if you like, right?
Okay.
And so, sort of, our core technology is around shifting what your brain waves are doing, making some oscillatory regime, some brainwave frequencies stronger, making some weaker, that kind of thing. But that's really just the core of a whole bag of tricks that we have. And so if you were to talk about sleep music, for example, right? You certainly don't want to throw on Spotify and have the track changing every 3 to 5 minutes, right? That's a disaster. You really
Sure.
want you want a single track of music that's 8 hours long because the brain is a change detector. And there's a really important thing about sleep is that it's not so much about the absolute loudness or what's going on in the music. It's that you don't want things to change, right? But in any case, the something as basic as the length of the music you're making is another one of the tricks in our bag. So the
Okay.
brainwave, yeah, the brainwave thing is the cool sciencey thing that's at the core of our tool set. But we make very long tracks. We do things like reducing brightness. So instead of bright and shiny things, you have you basically reduce the treble and you reduce what are called salient events, right? Things that are surprising that grab your attention, right?
Ah, okay.
Like snare hits that are slightly off the beat, right? Or cymbal
Okay.
crashing or a guitar solo, right? The last thing you want in the world if you're trying to sleep or study is a guitar solo. And so, you'll build something that's more repetitive, but the issue is how do you make something that is repetitive and made to be ignored, yet is not annoying as heck and boring and just the same thing over and over,
True.
right? And so again, it's this really interesting fine line that our musicians have to walk of making optimal background music essentially that stimulates the brain in the right way and yet does not jump out, grab your attention, and do what you don't want it to do. But again, at the most basic level, we're making music that is designed to change your brain, to shift your brain states towards what you need to do, and it does this not only with our core technology, which, if we want to get sciencey about it, is amplitude modulation, right? Rapid changes in loudness that affect your brainwaves, but also things like making the tracks super long, making sure they're not too bright, reducing surprising events, and so on and so forth.
Well, and I did notice in the 3-day, there's a free 3-day trial of your product for anybody. And during my explorations of that, I noticed that you can be very specific on setting your settings. If you want
Mhm.
acoustic type music, classical, piano, rock, if you want nature sounds, if you want something that's electronic, there's so many different selections that you can really create your settings so that you're not getting something that's annoying. You're getting something that you're going to enjoy. And you kind of use that science, but layer music on top of it in some way. And with the science, is it kind of like you mentioned the brain waves and was it the neuro oscillations?
Mhm, mhm. Yep, yep,
Okay,
yep.
so do you start with that in terms of creating this music? Start with what you want the brain waves to be and then sort of go from there?
In a sense, the music comes first. And when it comes to genres, we make sure that there's a wide variety of genres because preference is always going to be a thing that is super important, and the science cannot touch that. What we have to
Sure.
do, right, right. It's not a question for science if you dislike a genre of music because of past experience or whatever the culture you grew up in. Um,
Yeah.
but our job is to make sure that the science part of it that affects your brainwaves can be worked in to any of the genres that are in there. So the way that works is we might start, for example, with focus. We say, okay, we want to target beta brainwaves, which we know to be between 12 and 20 hertz. It's about the speed of a helicopter, if you kind of think about it, right? That kind of
Okay.
thing. And so now we say, okay, we have electronic music, we have nature sounds, we have all these genres, and we have to make sure that that rapid modulation is embedded into that music in a way that is effective but not annoying. That's really, really tricky. And one of the things that has to be done is that it has to be aligned to the beat. When there is a beat, it has to be aligned to the beat. If there is no beat, we have to make sure that, the modulation exists in frequency bands where there is energy and not where anyway, we don't have to get, too far into the technical details. But in terms of what comes first, yes, the brainwaves come first in the sense that, you have to have a particular modulation rate to drive the brain to do a thing. But also the music comes first in terms of the actual production of the thing. Like in a literal sense, the musicians will make the underlying music before the brainwave aspect is added onto it.
Well, I know you have a lot of the science behind the product available on your website. You also have
Mhm.
some pictures of brains
Mhm.
sort of under the influence of
Yeah,
Brain
yeah. Yeah.
FM versus under the influence of just a Spotify playlist or like white noise or pink noise or brown noise or whatever the latest color is.
Mhm.
So it's I encourage listeners to go online and take a look at some of the science that's available on on there just because we're limited in the time that we have here with how deep we can go into that. But it's really interesting to check that out. And I know just the couple days that I was able to use it before the weekend hit and we had out of town guests and, that was kind of the end of that. But the couple nights that I was able to use it prior to our conversation right now, I did sleep really well those nights. So I am really looking forward to continuing to use this because even though I don't, thank goodness, have insomnia anymore, sleep issues are still sort of my weak link. Like if anything is off, I'm going to either have problems falling asleep or staying asleep. So I am really looking forward to using this some more and experimenting with it. I know I have family members, I have friends who I think will also really get into this. So I'm really excited to try that. I have a whole bunch of questions I would love to ask you. I know Brain FM is supported by the National Science Foundation. There's more information on that on your website. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what that relationship is, or do they fund research that you do? What's that
Yeah, I'd love to.
relationship?
So thanks to actually Dr. Psyche Louie and her group over at Northeastern University, we were awarded a National Science Foundation grant to support our research, specifically in ADHD,
Ah,
and to create music to help people with ADHD. Not as a cure, not as anything else like that, but really just a tool to use while you're focusing, right?
uh-huh.
And a simple way to explain what we ended up making is something like an auditory fidget spinner. And you know what a
Okay.
fidget spinner is, right?
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
little thing, you play with it. It's sort of like absorbs some attentional capacity, yet is easy to ignore, but fulfills this need for self-stimulation that the ADHD brain has, right?
Ah,
And if you listen to our focus music, that's what you hear. It's this that's really easy to ignore, and yet, like a fidget spinner, is providing this subtle stimulation that's sort of replacing the shaking of a leg or the twiddling of thumbs or what have you, but it's doing it through music, right?
okay.
Yeah, and that's a simple way to explain it. There's also a brainwave neural oscillation story, but that it's basically an auditory fidget spinner. And so we used that funding. We did some really awesome neuroimaging work at Psyche Louise Lab at Northeastern. And that was actually just published 2 months ago in a really great Nature journal called Communications Biology.
Ooh, I'll just
And
get the link to that so I can put that in the episode notes.
yes, yes. And you can find that, you can definitely find that online. It's open access. But there we did EEG work, which is looking at electrical currents at the scalp, which indicates brain activity. We also did functional MRI, which looks at blood flow inside the brain. And we did behavioral work looking at performance on a sustained attention task. And with all of that measures, we found that there's really something special happening with this music in comparison, not only to Spotify focus music, but also in comparison to exactly the same underlying music without that modulation. And this was the really cool thing is that usually when people go out and they do music comparisons and try to publish a paper, it's, oh, I tested heavy metal versus classical music and I found that classical music was better for. Well, there are a million things that are different. Is it the
Sure.
tempo? Is it the timbre of the instruments? Is it the nature of the vocal? Right. And so to do a really well controlled experiment, you need to take exactly the same underlying music and just change one thing. And that one thing that we changed was the amplitude modulation that drives brainwaves, the thing that I've described as being a helicopter, helicopter, right? And we manipulated the rate of that modulation and the depth, the intensity of that modulation. And we found that only at the rate that we predicted to work based on what brainwaves should be doing, only at that rate did performance improve for people with ADHD. And so it was a very precise prediction. If the rate was higher, did not work. If the rate was lower, did not work. So it wasn't just about adding amplitude modulation. It was really about getting those modulations to line up with the brainwave regime that was known to be important for focus in these people, right? So very, very cool stuff. And then in the neuroimaging component, similarly, we showed attentional networks were more active in response to this music. And in the EEG component, we showed those brainwaves themselves with a massive increase in the strength, essentially, of those brainwaves. So it's a really cool paper that has many experiments in it and took us a long time to do, but thanks to funding from the National Science Foundation, we got it done, got it published. Very proud of that work, and the technology there is available in the app, and so now in the app, we have a special mode for ADHD. And
Okay.
you can go in there and you can flip a switch, and essentially it cranks the fidget spinner on a high, right? It makes
Sure.
you know, uh, mirroring what we saw in the paper, and people absolutely love it. My goodness.
Well, I know Eric Fisher has talked about that facet of Brain
Yeah,
FM quite a bit before because that's something that he really utilizes and has found to really be helpful for him.
it's completely unique to us. It's patented technology. We're the only people that do this, and it's really amazing stuff.
One of my favorite ways to enhance my life with music is to play just for fun songs on the piano at the end of the day. My current favorites are ABBA songs and songs from the 80s, like We Are the World. With Sheet Music Direct, I can explore new music, track my favorites, play and download scores anytime from any device. This online treasure trove of digital sheet music is powered by music publisher Hal Leonard and has over 1 million arrangements, ready to view, listen to, and download instantly. Prices start at just 99 cents and include selections for every instrument, genre, and skill level. My family has relied on Sheet Music Direct for years for musical joy and convenience. For an entire musical library at your fingertips, visit sheetmusicdirect.com.
Our position is that Brain FM should not be a replacement for medication, that you can use it in conjunction with your medication, but we see it as a supplement. And really, where we feel Brain FM is most useful for people in general are for people that are not quite at the level where they need medication, right?
Ah,
And
sure.
it's a huge swath of people. I think it was Ohio University recently did a survey that you can find online where they polled people on the street and said, we understand that 5% of people are diagnosed with ADHD, but how many people think they have ADHD or have ADHD symptoms that don't quite reach the level where they have to go see a doctor? And they went and talked to people on the street, and the number they got was 25%, I think. Like
Oh
full
boy. Well, I know so many people where
right.
either good friends where they know and that they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm sure I have ADHD, but I don't really want to go
Exactly.
on meds. I'm able to
That's it.
manage it." Yeah.
That's it. And those people we call subclinical, right? And
Okay.
so even if only 5% of the population have clinical ADHD, you have another maybe 20%, maybe even more that have subclinical ADHD. And what are they going to do? Right. And moreover, what about people who are in countries or places in the world where psychiatric help is not so easy to get, where
Sure.
medications are actually banned a lot of places,
Mm,
or people who don't have access for any number of other reasons, right? And so, Brain FM for the price of a sandwich a month, we can provide you something which really helps, get the job done while you're using it.
well, whenever you can reduce your dependence on meds or make them even more effective by something that's non-addictive, something that doesn't have side effects and risks, why not? Especially when it comes to something like sleep. I mean, when I was dealing with insomnia, my doctor was kind of like, I don't know what's going on, but I can give you a prescription sleeping pill for it. And I looked at the laundry list of side effects and was like, not sure if that's going to be any better than what I'm dealing with now. But I know you've gotten a lot of testimonials from people who have used Lunesta or Ambien or some other kind of med
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
have really just been thrilled with the results that they've got from Brain FM. Anything else
Yeah.
you want to say about that?
Oh, well, people do absolutely love Brain FM. I mean, our reviews are always glowing, and I hardly ever see negative reviews, which is really amazing. But in terms of sleep specifically, yeah, people just really find that it works. I can go into a little bit of why sleep music is effective, and particularly with
Okay,
Brain
great.
FM, what we do to try to make it more effective.
Great.
Yeah, at the most basic level, right? That as with all functional music, you have different aspects of the music that are doing different things, right? And with sleep, you have a very basic level, which is just masking, right? And that's just, hey, I want some sound to drown out other sounds which might be worse for my sleep, whether it's traffic noise, honking, the people next door arguing, leaves rustling outside, whatever it is. I want to
Mhm.
replace that intermittent noise that, again, the brain is a change detector, right? The worst thing is having things turn on, turn off, turn on, turn off. And I want to replace
Because
that with something.
that sense of hearing is one thing we can't turn off. It's
Right,
always on.
exactly. And the auditory system, one of the really important things for it in terms of survival is that it is your alert system, right? It's protecting you when it's dark, right? Or when
Yeah.
you're sleeping. And so that makes your auditory system really sensitive to surprising events in the world when you're sleeping. And in the modern world that we live in today, that is an issue for a lot of people. And so you want to replace things in your environment that are intermittent and surprising and annoying and going to wake you up. And you want to replace that with something stable. You want to cover that stuff up, mask it with something stable. And so that's the most basic level of what sleep music is doing. But hey, a white noise machine can do that too. Actually, ask me about white noise versus other colors of noise later. White noise is actually not really great, but noise period, right? Something that sounds like a sh or hiss or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's masking. It's going to cover up the other stuff. But then on another level, you want something that's, not just covering up, but is also particularly stable, that it has some like statistical regularity to it
Okay.
that your brain won't hear as an alert signal, right? So what I mean is, say I have street noise. I find the street noise makes it hard to sleep, so I cover it up with music from Spotify. Oh my goodness, I've just made a mistake because that music itself contains surprising events, right?
Right.
It contains track changes or guitar solos or what have you. So it's not enough just to cover up outside sounds. You want to cover up the outside sounds with something that is particularly stable. So that's like level 2. Level 3, now we get into things like being soothing, right? The emotional state that you want to be in, sort of lull you to sleep, right? Something like a lullaby, your mother's voice, nature sounds, babbling brook, what have you. That is undeniably super important. And then eventually we get to talking about, the real science, and then we get back into brainwaves. And when you dig deep enough, you're going to find a capital N neuroscience explanation for what's going on. And here you have to talk about delta waves, right? Slow wave sleep. And the sleeping brain is dominated by these neural oscillations, brainwaves, that are very slow. We're talking about one cycle every 2 seconds to maybe one cycle per second. That's like waves on a beach speed, if you like, right?
Okay.
And it turns out you can actually encourage that neural activity by having sound that is modulated in that way. And it's a similar mechanism as
So that level is sort of where we get beyond the sound machine, the fan that you have turned on in the background, or even, I don't know if Spotify has this, but I think there's certain apps that will give you just sort of like lo-fi sound. So there's other places where you can get those first few levels, but now the level that you're talking about is where the science of Brain FM comes into play.
Exactly. You want something that's going to mirror sleeping brainwaves is probably the simplest way to say it, right?
Okay.
And to drive brainwaves into the state, just like what I was saying with focus. So that turns out to be, very important. And that's something that
And is that sort of that entrainment characteristic of
it's
music that
entrainment.
allows this to work?
I was going to avoid using that big word, but
Oh, okay.
but entrainment is exactly the right term. Um,
Okay.
yeah. So the way to explain entrainment, which is what I've been talking about, is to say that the rhythms in the brain mirror rhythms in the world, right?
Okay.
And if I, hear a drum beat or I clap my hands at a certain speed, you have activity in the brain that is moving at that speed, right?
Mhm.
Now, it's also the case that rhythmic activity in the brain is doing other things. It's supporting focus, it's supporting sleep. And those things actually interact. Surprisingly, it
Okay.
didn't have, yeah, it didn't have to be the case, but it does turn out to be the case.
So it's a similar function of the brain to being able to clap with the music, or you hear a certain beat, a certain song, and you want to start dancing.
Yeah,
Or you're in a concert and you and everybody else is sort of
yeah, yeah,
experiencing some of the same emotions and bonding somehow together by hearing this music and sort of clapping and
absolutely.
moving together to it.
That's exactly right. And when people ask me, "Hey, how long does it take for Brain FM to affect your brain?" The conservative answer we like to give is, 5 minutes or 3 to 5 minutes, because when we do our behavioral tests, the length of the experimental blocks we have are 3 to 5 minutes, and that's kind of the limit of our resolution. And we can see that your performance on a task changes after 3 to 5 minutes. But in fact, the analogy with dancing or clapping your hands is a much better one. And I would say to you, hey, how long does it take between hearing a song that makes you want to dance and actually moving your leg to the beat, right?
Mm,
It's
okay.
much faster than 3 to 5 minutes. It's, maybe 10 seconds, maybe 20 seconds, depending on what you're paying attention to, right?
Sure.
But that's the kind of time scale we're talking about in terms of music affecting the brain and those effects on the brain being able to influence all of your brain functions, which is entrainment. And that's, yeah, it's a very, very fast thing.
Well, one other thing that I read that I want to just mention that I thought was really cool is some of the sound, the 3D sound that's in Brain FM's music. It allows sound to shift from one ear to the other, and it creates this
Mhm.
rocking in a hammock type effect, which I thought, ooh, just hearing that description is kind of relaxing to me. So I thought that was really cool. One thing that was really neat too that I read is that your response improves as you use the app, and the app sort of learns what's working for you. There's a lot of areas where you can give feedback with either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And so the app kind of learns what works for you personally and individually. And so your response and experience is going to continually improve. Also, the product is continually improving through the ongoing clinical trials and studies and research
Yep.
that you're doing. You personally, I think, do a lot of this research, right?
Yes, absolutely. With the help of Dr. Saikalui and the people at Northeastern, yeah, absolutely. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, we do the research in house, and when I started with the company, I was skeptical. I was just out of grad school, and I was like, I don't know if music can really do this, and it took me running the studies for me to sign on with the company.
Oh,
So that's
interesting.
that's kind of a cool
Interesting.
story. Yeah.
Well, again, back to the fact that if this can help people reduce their reliance on meds, if it can amplify the effect of meds, I mean, the non-medicated sleep is always going to be the best in the long run. So if you can reduce that reliance, all the better. We're talking about next gen lullaby, lullaby here with Brain FM's music.
That's a great frame. I love that. Next gen lullaby. I'd like to take that for marketing, please.
Go for it. Go for it. Do you have any recommendations on what kind of speakers or headphones or earbuds people should listen to this if they're using it for sleep or any other purpose for that matter? I mean, I know when I was dealing with insomnia, I at one point got this headphone. It was like a headband that was really soft and had flat earbuds in it. So if you're a side sleeper, which I am, they were comfortable and you could still hear. But I know there's also bone conduction devices. I'm wondering if that would work for people who have hearing issues and they're taking their hearing aids out at night. What recommendations do you have for people in terms of what devices or headphones or earphones they should be using to listen to this music?
Sure. Headphones are usually recommended over loudspeakers, for starter. The exception is if you cannot find comfortable sleep phones for your head or for your sleeping position, right? And yes, they make the headband ones with very flat speakers. But if you find yourself in a situation where, hey, I've tried what are supposed to be the most comfortable, this is me, by the way, I've tried what are supposed to be the most comfortable sleep phones, and you know what? It's still messing with my sleep. At that point, we say, hey, go for the loudspeakers. It's fine.
Okay.
With our focus music, though, headphones are always preferred for actually really interesting reasons having to do with acoustics, which is that in almost any space you're going to be working in, there's significant reverb of sound bouncing off the walls, right?
Hmm.
And the modulation rate, the rapid, da, 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 in the focus music gets muddy as it bounces off of walls, right?
Ah, okay.
And so we really try to get people to use headphones whenever possible when it comes to our focus and relax and meditate. But with sleep, the speed of that modulation is so slow that the reverb is not an issue, and we would rather have people be comfortable. Um,
Okay.
you did mention bone conduction headphones. Interestingly, I recommend against those
Oh,
because
okay.
they have very poor high frequency response. So sure, if you are hard of hearing or you can't hear high frequencies anyway, then bone conduction headphones may be fine. I actually have a pair that I use for running, when I don't particularly care about sound quality or I don't need the treble to carry information.
Okay.
But yeah, bone conduction headphones cut out a lot of treble range. And for our music, sometimes that treble range can be functionally important. So we really want the whole frequency spectrum to be in the music. Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
You mentioned focus, and I know we've touched on that a few times during our
Mhm.
conversation. We've talked about sleep. You also mentioned just a second ago, relax and meditate. I know those are the
Mhm.
other sort of primary applications for Brain FM. You also mentioned ADHD and how that is
Mhm.
sort of maybe an unexpected application that people have had a lot of success in using Brain FM for. Are there any other applications of Brain FM? I mean, we don't have time to get into all four: focus, relax, sleep, meditate. That way, we've really gotten into the sleep today. But any other unexpected applications of Brain FM that you want people to know about that are either active uses that people may be surprised about, or uses that are sort of in the works that are in development that you maybe can't go into detail about, but want to just let
Yeah,
people know are in the works?
you're 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 gonna get me in trouble here, but I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna go for it anyway.
Okay.
I'm going to, yeah, I'm gonna spill the beans a little bit. We've had a segment of our users that started using our focus music to work out, and they discovered that particular genres, specifically electronic and a genre that we call grooves, that has a lot of sort of excitement in it.
Uh-huh.
Those genres paired with the amplitude modulation at a very high intensity level, that helicopter thing, which is supposed to be just for people with ADHD. If they use it, even if they don't have ADHD and they're at the gym,
Yeah.
they found that it was having a really, really strong effect on their ability to push themselves.
Ah,
And and so now we do have a workout mental state that is in development, and
okay.
I cannot say any more than that. But
Okay.
we are really, really excited about it because workout is actually an area where you don't necessarily have to make music to be ignored. Our musicians can have a lot more fun because
Sure.
when you're
Yep.
exercising, you actually kind of want to be distracted, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Totally.
want music that's listenable. So it's a really fun sort of new frontier for us. I'm excited to do research and figure out how much better it is than what's standard now.
Uh-huh.
But I've used it myself, and there's really something interesting happening there. What for me, one of the first thing that happens when I listen to our focus music is I start shaking my leg. I have these motor movements, and there's definitely something that's being driven in my motor cortex by beta oscillations, and there's a good theoretical underpinning for this. So I've already said too much, but there's something really exciting coming down the road with workout and Brain FM. But yeah, that's sort of the unexpected one. Right now we're really focused on ADHD, and we're really changing the game for a lot of people with ADHD.
Awesome. Well, I know a lot of people are in sort of still in their New Year's resolution phase
Mhm.
of sort of,
Mhm.
trying to establish these new lifestyle habits. In my mind, this is the easiest modification ever that you can make to your lifestyle is just start listening to
Mhm.
this. I mean, if you can improve your sleep, you'll probably just by virtue of that improve your athletic performance because you'll be
Mhm.
rested, you'll have more strength and energy. You'll be able to focus more if you're well rested. So, there's so many ways that you can improve your daily activities just by sleeping better, but then also focus. This is something that you could use all day long, whether it's working on homework, focusing at work, sleeping, of course, at night, relaxing in the evening. You can have your kids use it. So, lots of really great
Yeah.
applications for this. Like I said, I'm looking forward to using it more and continuing to tweak it according to my preferences so that it works
Mhm.
more and more effectively for me. It's available as a mobile app and web app. As I
Okay.
mentioned, there's a free 3-day trial available for anyone. Just go to the website and you'll see that button there to sign up for the 3-day trial. There's no credit card needed for that. You can just click the button and start using it right away.
Mhm.
Anything else that you want to mention that we haven't had a chance to talk about that you just want to make sure listeners hear before we wrap things up?
Oh my goodness, I could go on for another hour, but I won't. But I will mention one very cool feature that we recently added, which is that now when you start Brain FM, you actually take a little quiz. where previously, you had to interact with the music a lot to have it figure out what's right for your brain.
Okay.
But now you answer 5 questions, and we do a pretty good job, I think, of setting you up at your first listen with what we think will work best for you. And then, of
Okay.
course, after that, there is, learning, and you want to find things that are your favorites and whatnot. But we have this onboarding quiz now that I think is really, really cool and gets you a lot more quickly to what your brain needs. I just wanted to
Very
mention
cool.
that one. Hmm.
Cool. Well, looking forward to using this more. Kevin, thank you
Hmm.
so much. As you know, I ask all my guests to close out our conversation with a musical ending, a coda, by
Mm.
sharing a song or story about a moment that music enhanced your life. Do you have a song or story that you can share with us in closing today?
Ooh, so this is not so much a story as a concept or
Okay.
an idea that I wanted to pitch to people, right? Which is what you might call the concept of the charitable machine in the age of AI, which is basically, in short, that you don't have to pick between the conservatory and the computer, that you don't have to pick between acoustic instruments and spending all your time in your digital audio workstation, that there's a vast middle ground where technology can supplement expression without supplanting it. And the reason I wanted to sort of pitch this to people is that around me in the world of music, I see this divide that's getting more and more stark as AI is progressing and technology is progressing, where you have the people that say, oh, I love this. I'm going to become an electronic musician. And then you have the people that say, oh, I'm not technologically minded. I'm going to go back to playing my cello. And I hate to see that split. And I would love to see the gray area between that filled in more. And I
Sure.
think it's more possible now than ever. And what I mean by the charitable machine is this is actually a term that was coined by the pianist Glenn Gould 50 years ago. He was a great Bach interpreter. Um, but he horrified traditionalists by suggesting that recording technology should allow listeners to pick whatever tempo they wanted. He said, "I'm just going to record this at an arbitrary tempo, and when people play the record at home, they can choose what tempo they want to listen to my music at." Right? Absurd,
I can
right?
see that horrifying some people.
Yeah, horrifying.
The
And it never
purists. Yes.
it never caught on, and I kind of get it, and maybe it doesn't make sense, but what really matters is that he was thinking broadly about the role of technology in musical expression, right? Versus these days, we tend to get stuck thinking about technology in music in terms of, okay, you have electronic instruments, you have digital production, and you have generative composition, and what else is there, right? It's like, well, if I'm not interested in playing an electric guitar, I'm not interested in using Ableton or Sonar or whatever producer software, and I'm not interested in robots writing my music for me. Then you know I'm gonna go back to playing my cello again, right? Or I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna and sometimes these people take the purist approach that you were saying of vibrating wood is beyond anything that a computer can produce. Maybe, but the point is you don't have to pick one or the other, right?
Sure. You can have the
And
both and.
yeah, we tend to fear the machine or become one with it. And I think that's not the right approach. I think that now more than ever, we should all be asking, well, how can we see technology as a useful friend to musical
Mm-hmm.
expression? Something that can be kept separate from us, but still has this boundless potential to show us wonderful things if we just explore, right?
Yeah.
And and not yeah, you get the point. So I think that is a really important message to try to get out more and more as technology advances, right? Before people get stuck in these camps. And if you did want to play a piece of music, I've sent something to you by way of example of what I mean, where I took Glenn Gould's recording as a homage of Bach's. It's a little prelude in C major, Bach BWV 924, I think it is. And I took this piano recording and I actually extracted the timing and acceleration of the keystrokes, giving a MIDI representation, essentially computerized representation of how his hands were moving on the keyboard. Then I applied various delays and reverb and resynthesis tricks and created a sort of enhanced version that is still recognizably Glenn Gould playing piano, but it pulls out all of these hidden harmonies that are usually buried in the note's overtones in a really interesting way. And importantly, I did not compose additional voices, right? The piece is simple arpeggios. But what you'll hear is something much more complex than that. But I did not write that music. I basically plugged in a couple of computer things and pulled something new out of the music. And everything that you hear was, in a sense, contained in that original music. And so it's this really interesting in-between space of, it's not generative music, but it's also not just a piano recording. It's something in between. And wow, isn't that cool?
Thank you so much to Kevin for joining us today and for his research and work with Brain FM that enables the power of music to more directly improve our sleep, focus, and relaxation. I have continued to use Brain FM in the month that it's been since Kevin and I recorded this conversation. And I have to say that I am a huge fan. I use it every night before bed and just have it playing in the background as I read and unwind before bed. I am thrilled with how well I've been sleeping, and I definitely plan to continue using it. I haven't used the focus feature much just because I personally don't have a problem with focus. I think my house could be burning down around me and I wouldn't notice it if I'm really focused on a task, but I definitely will be using that feature when the occasion calls for it. Like when I'm on road trips with my husband where he's driving and listening to the radio while I'm trying to work on my laptop in the passenger seat. There is a free 3-day trial of Brain FM available to anyone on their website, but Kevin has made a special offer available to Enhance Life with Music listeners. You can get a free 30-day trial by going to brain.fm/enhance. There's a link in the episode notes. No credit card is needed for the trial, so be sure to check it out and let me know what you think. And if you know of someone who would enjoy this episode and enjoy Brain FM, please share the episode with them. It's easy to do right in your podcast listening app. Just look for the share feature. You'll find all links from today's conversation in the episode notes, as well as a transcript of the conversation and related episodes you may enjoy, including my conversations with Eric Fisher and Dr. Psyche Louie, who we referenced in our conversation, an episode on lullabies, soothing sleep for older adults, and enhancing athletic performance with music. All Enhanced Life with Music episodes are evergreen, so be sure to check out the back catalog for more ways that music can make your life better. If there's a topic or guest that you would like to hear featured on this show, or if you have a question for me that you'd like to hear answered on the show, please let me know. You can always connect with me on email, mindy@mpetersonmusic.com, Facebook, Instagram, X, or LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing the show. Until next time, may your life be enhanced with music.